Yeah, and so welcome everybody. My name is Sandy Buhai. I'm from Loyola. We also have with us Rebecca Duffino, also from Loyola. We are not twins, even though I think we are. And I am the from University of Laverne School of Law, also in California. So we're in the Southern California crew, which means we're actually freezing at the moment.
But it's raining in Los Angeles.
Yes,
that makes
that's
you
true.
feel better. It's raining right now.
So, we're going to talk about the class component, obviously in the age of the new ABA standards. So I took the information, so I'm starting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of where we are, what I've been able to figure out about what people are doing. And so I want to tell you where I got my information. It's of course Lexstern, our wonderful Lexstern website. CSAIL, however you say it, I don't know. It's the wonderful survey that David does, Sandra Kochi from Michigan. Great, tons of information. Place, so we're part of the Greater Los Angeles Area Consortium on Externships. I don't know why we came up with that name, but we did a long time ago. But so I've got lots of information from all the Glaze schools. Syllabi, people were nice enough. I got 15 people that sent me their syllabi. Boy, some people, it's like 70 pages. But there's also syllabi on Lexstern. So, and I'm going to encourage everybody to send your stuff to Kendall Peru if you have things. So she can post them on Lexstern, because there's only a couple. It would be great to really have lots of things there. So if you send it to her, she will post. I did a little survey, which was less than successful because I was having Lexstern issues. And then finally, of course, the ADA list. So that's where I got most of this information from. And so of course, we spent lots of time on this already today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here. I think that a couple of things that I've noticed from the syllabi that people have really done a good job of now is including this language in their syllabus. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense as a lawyer, right? To put the rule in and trying to sort of have the ADA say to do. So if you look at the syllabi, you will see that they all sort of say that they're doing these kinds of things. What we're really focusing on is the classroom component. And so the bottom one, a classroom instructional component. So I will tell you that my reading, for what it's worth, is that this does not require a classroom component for every field placement. Having said that, it seems like, and you'll see almost everyone does one, but there are other ways. What I like in looking at this though is that they give us the options, right? So they say there's a classroom component or regular scheduled tutorials or other means of, and then they say ongoing contemporaneous faculty guided reflection. So when I read that, I think, okay, that's what they really want to accomplish from whatever means of doing it, right? So it seems to me that that informs a little bit about what we do in our classrooms. That really we're looking at the classroom accomplishing this contemporaneous faculty guided reflection. As you'll see in a minute, pretty much everyone does reflections of some sort anyway, right? So, about 86% of field placement courses do include some sort of classroom component. For schools that allow a student to repeat a placement, about more than half, slightly more than half, do require attendance in a classroom component for the second one. About 30% do not. The rest, which is about 20%, have some kind of flexible thing where they have the students, the advanced students, experienced students or veteran students, whatever word you want to use, do something somewhat different. So they might go to 2 classes and not go to 2, and they might vary the readings but still attend, or they have some kind of tutorial where they meet with the students but less, something like that. So this comes from C-Scale, and it's very little change from 2013 to 2014, which surprised me, because I thought that we would see a big increase. And at our school, I will say, we did change. We did not used to do a classroom component. So for the last, I'm doing this 25 years, I think I figured. So for the last 20 plus years, we didn't have a classroom component except for full times. But we have a large part-time externship program, and we did not do a classroom component. And so then I went on sabbatical. I came back, and they told me I was teaching a class. For no pay, and yeah, anyway. That's how it goes. So I have to say I really enjoy the classroom, and what we're going to talk about in a little bit with Professor Delfino, Rebecca's going to talk about doing an online class, which is what we do. And that's been a really interesting experience as well. So I really thought there would be a change, which is why we sort of came up with this idea of classroom component and then age of the new regulations, because I thought things have changed so much, because they did at our school, but apparently not so much for most people. Okay. So most programs, about 60% of them, spend about an hour a week in the classroom. So the majority of programs are basically a 1 credit unit. Surprisingly, at least to me, over 30% of the schools spend 2 hours a week on a classroom component. So I just thought that was a lot of credit hours for the classroom component. But I mean, there's certain things you can do, but anyway. So when I was looking at the surveys though, I don't think, so I say 60% spend 1 hour a week. So my gut tells me that that's a little high. That I think there are people who responded, when I looked at the survey, it was sort of, 1 hour a week was the sort of the bottom answer. So it was, you couldn't answer less than that. So I'm guessing that a lot of people who do 1 hour per week are really doing slightly less than that. Either they're doing half a credit, or so they're doing like, half an hour, or more likely 1 hour every 2 weeks. Or they're doing something where they front load a few and then don't do them throughout. So I take it with a little bit grain of salt that they're actually doing the 1 hour per week. Certainly it matters whether it's separately credited or not. So for people who separately credit, then they're having 1 credit. But a lot of schools have it just combined. They just do a combined unit. You do a 4-unit externship, included in that 4-unit field placement. Included in that 4-unit field placement is the seminar, which could be 7 or 8 hours as opposed to 12 or 15.
So what do you mean by classroom component? Like, so just I know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Services of like 85% do a classroom component.
So a classroom component is a course of some sort. It could be online, it could be live. But it's some kind of course that goes along with your field placement. And that's required.
So any kind of activity, is that what you call a course? I'm just trying to...
Right. So yeah, I mean, so the courses really vary, I think, from everything from a plain old sit down in a classroom kind of thing to, an online thing you sign up for that you list that we're going to see later. I mean, it has to, but it's run by, but faculty run by some faculty member. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. It's good to stop me if I'm confusing. And I know I sometimes talk fast too, so slow down a little bit. Okay. So grading. Again, I was really surprised. Over half the schools that have classroom components, so remember 86% of the schools have a classroom component, over half of them have mandatory letter grades. And of those, slightly less than half do a curve. So we just heard earlier that the curve can sometimes vary. So I think that it's quite possible that many of the curves are not quite as strict as some of our curves in our other classes. But, so anyway. About 40% do mandatory pass-fail.
What do you mean by mandatory letter grades? In other words, a student doesn't get to choose, right?
But the student or the faculty, I think the way they meant is that the course is graded, or the course, on a letter grade, or the course is pass-fail. There are, a few programs that actually let the faculty member choose. They can choose to grade or not grade, which is interesting. I don't know how you make that choice from semester to semester. But I think that, so yeah, it's how the school mandates, right? So I think, over time, most of these, some of the schools, and I didn't talk about this because we're focusing on the classroom component, but some schools actually give an actual letter grade to their entire placement, right? So for those schools, it makes absolute sense that you would grade the classroom component as well. For, I think, the majority of schools that do a pass-fail for their overall placement, there seems to be a mix of some people actually grading the classroom and some people, like us, just doing a pass-fail. And I know we talked in other settings about pluses and minuses of that. Okay, most common class sizes are between 6 and 15. Almost 60% of the classes fit into that area. And the way it worked is, I think it's almost 30% was from 6 to 10, and another 30% was from 10 to 15. The next most common were the two on the other side, so 1 to 5 or 16 to 20. And then 15% of the classes had more than 20 students. So we just heard from a Cal Western where they limited their class size to 12, so they're sort of right in the middle there. I think that there seems to be a sense of the community that, you know, over 20 is really tough for this kind of class. We struggle with that. I mean, I have 19 at the moment, and even 19 I think is difficult to get enough participation. I mean, when I teach trial ad, I have 12, right? When I teach negotiation, I have 12. When I teach appellate ad, I have 12. That's the cap. So we're going to be going back and talking about that. Most of the teachers are full-time employees. In 2016, 35% of the teachers were adjuncts. I think the number of adjuncts is increasing. And the reason I think that is from what I saw in the syllabi that I got, the survey I got, talking to the vice folks. And so it seems like there's more of a movement to maybe have smaller classes, but then to hire adjuncts to help do that. You know, and obviously there are pluses and minuses for that. Okay, so not surprisingly, the greatest amount of classroom time is spent on field work, case discussion, professional identity / career development, and ethics / professional responsibility. Almost every course, I think it was 97% of the courses included those three topics. So I mean, those are the sort of really pervasive things. Skills instruction was included in about 70% of the classes. And I can imagine that varies. I mean, I can't tell you what exactly that is in each class, but I can imagine that would vary either depending on the placement or, you know, the school. Sometimes, you know, each of our schools are different in terms of what we teach before they come to the externship. And so at our school, most of our students have already had an interview and counseling class before they come into the externship. So there's less of a need to really teach that kind of thing. I know other schools, they haven't had that. And so that's something that they find here really important. Same thing with procedural law. And I was interested that about 60% of the schools do some kind of simulation during their externship class. And again, we've talked, I think, throughout this about different kinds of, you know, setups. And if you have a general class or if you have one specific to your subject area, how you would do that. Okay. Learning from practice. Many of the classes use at least some portion of learning from practice as their main assigned reading. But lots of people have other really kind of fun, interesting, different kinds of materials that they use. And this is why I again encourage you to send your stuff to Kendall so she can put it up so we can all get great ideas. Nearly everyone has reflections and journals. Many also require a longer paper or a presentation, and the syllabi can be posted to last term. I guess the last thing, I guess I don't want to exit because you're going to go next. The last thing so from this information that I found, I just, the most interesting thing and the reason I'm so glad I signed up to do this is that I got to look at all these different syllabi. So for example, we talked a little bit about whether we should require a seminar for a classroom component for someone who's experienced. So Alex, is he here? So Alex does a really cool advanced seminar where he has them watch movies. And the movies are then the way he takes off on the discussion. So he's not having to repeat the same readings or do anything the same. And I just think that's a great idea. And I'm just going to say, oh my God, I'm going to totally do this next time. So, yeah, did you do it too, Jody?
I did it. We totally took his syllabus and did it. It was so much fun.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So, but I would not have looked at other people's things except that I signed up to do this. So I really do encourage you. Now, Jody was one of the people who's nice enough to send me her syllabus, but if you haven't sent it, please do. And I'm going to give Kendall a list of people who sent it to me, so she'll probably nag you to send you hers if you haven't already done that. Okay, so at Loyola, we do an online class. We are an evening program, and we have full-time day, and we're in the middle of Los Angeles, where traffic is horrific. So for our students who are in a field placement and they're working until, 5 or 6 at night, and then they have class at night, because day students take evening classes, and vice versa. So scheduling is really an issue. So we decided to do an online class. And for me, it's been enlightening, because I've never done, I'm old, I don't do technology. So Professor Delfino, who is not old, will tell us about this.
All right, hello everyone. As Sandy said, Sandy and I teach together at Loyola. Just to reflect a bit more on why we did the online, our students are everywhere, and we also have, so we have judicial placements, we have private placements, and we have public interest pro bono placements, and at the DA's office and the public defender's office. And because of how widespread our students are, some are in other areas of the state, and because of their time pressures, we decided to try an online course component, an online class. And so we have it divided. I do the judicial, Sandy does the agency, non-prosecutor, public interest. We have an adjunct who does prosecutors. We have a public defender, and then one for the private arena. So everyone, however, is doing an online, and we're trying it this year. So I wanted to simulate an online class so you could see what it looks like. What we are using right now, it's the Cisco WebEx, and you can see, this is my, I don't know if you have a laptop, if you're interested to see if you can actually get into the class, but there's the URL for the class that I've currently set up that's going on right now. Somebody's in, yes. Oh, excellent,
Hey.
yeah, you got in. Okay, see, so I have a class participant. So how does this work with my students? So mine are Fridays at noon, which I know is a lunch hour, but we actually, our program is the equivalent of about a half a unit, although it's folded in so that it's not graded, it's passed on pass, and it's part of the total number of units they would get for the placement, but it's a half a unit measure, so it's about 7 hours. Every 2 weeks is when we meet for about an hour and some change. They're all on Fridays, they're all at noon, so that the students have a chance to work their full day. Many of them, we can hear them eating lunch, or they're outside at a Starbucks or whatever, and they're either calling in or they're signing in this way. And so about a week before the class, I send them an invitation that has the URL information, and some of them call in this information and their access code, and they get a reminder the morning of, and then when the time arrives, they all sign in, and this is what they see. And some of them I can see, so you can see me. You can see me, and they can always see me, and sometimes I can see them, and other times, like with the person who signed in here, I can just see their name, and so I can see who's on and who's not. I take roll, about 5 minutes in, I take roll, and they know this, and I take an oral roll, and they say here, and then I take roll at the end of the class, because I know what goes on is they're like, okay, she's not going to call on me anymore, I'm going to hang up. I can hear them hang up, but I don't know who it is, and so I take roll at the end, so they know that, and it makes a huge difference, because everybody stays on until their name is called. So I take roll, and then we began. Now the simulation that I wanted to show all of you is the piece that I do on ethics. And so they don't look at this the whole time. What I show them is I want to share my screen. So what I'm going to share with them, okay, that's Sandy's PowerPoint. I have a PowerPoint that normally they would be up and ready to go. And so let's look at it from the beginning. So there's my PowerPoint, and I take my little self and I put myself here. Let's make me a little bigger. Let's see if I can make me bigger. No, I don't want to look at this participant. Okay, hold on, there we go. See, and there's always technical difficulties, right? And I tell them to get up and stretch during the technical difficulties. Let's hold on.
Well, my experience with this is that not only do the technical difficulties, but the students, because they know they are much better at technology than I am, will try to solve the technical difficulties.
Yes, they do.
Remotely. So they'll be saying, well, no, click on this or click on that.
We're going to leave me like this. All right. Sometimes they can just see me, but they can see me. And typically when someone's speaking, you can see them. So here's the screen that they would see. And today the topic would be for the class, after I've taken roll, I would say now we're going to talk about ethics and externships. And I would say to them, what you've all taken, everyone in the course is either currently in a professional responsibility course, or they've already taken a professional responsibility course, or they've attended my orientation at the beginning of the semester, which is in person and live, where I sort of generally review some of the basic ideas that might arise in their placements, like don't practice law without a license, like make sure that you follow the confidentiality rules in your placement, etc. But we always have a class also revisiting these issues on ethics a couple weeks in. So I would say to them, if you were the students, let's just name the ethical areas that might come up in an externship. And somebody would say, what? Confidentiality. And so I would say, yes, confidentiality. Others?
Unauthorized practice of law.
Unauthorized practice of law.
Conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest. Any others? Competence, yes. Diligence and competence. I don't have that one on the slide. I took it out because I thought I'd run out of time. But yes, competence and diligence. And then sometimes someone will say, well, some weird stuff is going on. And I say, oh, the weird stuff, that might be misconduct. So we throw in misconduct issues as well. And so I'll say, here are the ones, you all are so smart, I'm so glad you're participating. Here are the ones we're going to cover for today. And I would first, then we do a little reminder of like what the particular rule is. So I can move this so you can see it. And I would say, hey friends, let's remember what confidentiality is, and it's our professional duty of an attorney and all the people who work under them, including clerical staff, investigators, and law students, all of you, to maintain the confidence and secrets of a client, and this is for California, although the model rule would be the same. And so they say, that's great, we understand that. And then I will move to hypo. And here's a hypo that I may pull from a journal, or may pull from a discussion, or I may even pull it from the other semester when someone raises it. And here's the hypo. An extern that I work with, this is a student speaking, at the district court talks about cases that we were working on in the elevator of the courthouse, even when other people are in the elevator. I assume that everyone in the elevator works at the courthouse because the elevator is not accessible to the public. This is a real student concern that I got. And whoops. Next slide, here we go, sorry. So the question is, what should I do about it? And so I would say to the class, what should they do? What should they do, class?
Talk to the extern.
Talk to the extern. What are they supposed to talk to the extern about? You're being great students, because you're like, well, I can see you, which is the big difference, right? I'm worried that
you're violating a rule.
Right, I'm worried, you're violating.
You're violating the rule. Have you thought about the consequences of what you're doing?
Right, because don't you remember when we all met with the judge or the courthouse staff or the HR people, they told us that everything needs to remain confidential. So that's a concern, right? And that's good advice that I would say to the student, you should do that. That you should remind an extern, fellow extern, maybe there's no like power differential there, so you feel comfortable telling them. And even though you assume it's an elevator that's not public, you just don't know. And it's the district court, so there might be other employees outside of your chamber that are in the elevator. So that would be great advice, right? To remind your colleague that they shouldn't be doing that. So what do you do if nobody volunteers? That's a good question. So this is the challenge online, right? You can't see their faces. I'm looking right at you because you're on the spot now and you're going to answer. I'm standing here.
So
Yeah, right? On the phone, I call on people, right? I also have, because I teach in other areas at the law school, there are often people in externships that I know. So when in doubt, I'll call on someone I know. But I call on everybody at least once, sometimes twice, because I want them to participate. That's a real challenge online. It's this interpersonal exchange that we get is totally missing online. And I have to be honest with you, Sandy might agree, it's a huge deficit. When you read, social scientists tell us that more than 70% of communication is body language, that if you're doing it online, it's a challenge. So I will call on people, that's my answer. So then I will add on to that hypo. What if the person who's doing all this yakking in the elevator is my supervising clerk, and not my co-extern? So I throw out to the students, what do you do? Someone else, what do you do? Now it's your career clerk, or not even a term clerk who's yakking in the elevator. Students, what do you do? Anyone? Call me. Ah, you're going to call me. You're going to call me. So this is what sometimes happens in the courses, and I know this has happened to all of us. The students throw it back on you. You are the person that's in charge of these externships. Can't you do something? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I can call the judge.
Or I can role play with you how you might
Right.
respectfully
Right.
raise it with your clerk.
Right. That's the other thing to do, and that's probably what I would do first, right? Because I don't want to ruin the relationship with the judge. But this is a problem, right? That students are going to need to figure out how to navigate on their own or with our help. So that would be a hypo, and then we would talk through that for as long as it takes, and students always have interesting contributions. So that's our confidentiality piece. And then I'll review also, again, you can't disclose the identity of your client whether it's or the case without the authorization. You can't discuss these cases outside the chambers unless it's been heard in open court. You can't leave, or you shouldn't leave a case file open or your computer unattended. I'll remind them of these. They've heard these things before, but this is a good point. This is a teaching moment to remind them not to disclose this information that will identify clients or cases without express authority. Don't disclose client secrets, etc., without express authority or authorization from your supervising attorney. So we finish that up, and then we move on to another hypo.
Before you do, can I ask
Yeah.
another question?
Yeah.
Sorry to do this to you, but it's okay. So you call on the one person and they answer your question, and then maybe you answer the question, or how do other people volunteer to speak?
Well,
So
that's sort of interesting. So they yell out,
yeah.
right? They'll yell out, or if I can see them, sometimes I'll tell them if you want to get. Well, the one thing I will tell them with the online piece is it's not happening here, but sometimes you get lots of feedback, like from the volume of their phones, or they're outside and you can hear dogs barking or children crying or whatever because they're somewhere else. And so I'll tell them, if you're not going to speak, please mute your microphone, and they do. I can see when it's unmuted, and that's often a signal that someone wants to speak, and then I'll call on them and I'll say, is there something you want to add? Or they'll say, I always tell them the rule is when you speak, you have to say your name. Professor Delfino, this is Joan Smith. And then, it's weird and awkward. It's like this weird online sort of thing. But they say their name, and then I say, okay, stay in the queue, and then you can speak next. Yes, question?
I teach in an online class, and my students use the chat. So they ask questions using chat.
They can do that too.
Other students will answer them using chat.
There's also that capability with the WebEx. I haven't had students use that yet, probably because they haven't figured out that they can. But typically a student will just say, I want to say something, and then we just sort of take our turn.
Can you require them to be, because it sounds like, so you're doing synchronous.
Yes.
So is there a reason why you can't require the video? Because I'm always concerned that if they're on audio, they're just doing something else and going, every once in a while.
Yeah, there is that risk, but the problem is I'll have students, especially in my course, I don't know about Sandy's, but I have students who, because of their schedule, they really can't leave the courthouse, and yet they can't get online using the court's computers, and so they have to be on the phone. So this is my way to sort of accommodate them. I mean, I have like 4 students right now with a particular federal district court judge who wants them to be there, like even during their lunch hour, so they bring their lunches. I mean, it seems kind of like draconian, but it's a lifetime appointment. What am I going to say? So, I mean, seriously. And so they all, and I know this to be true because I actually called the town clerk, and I was like, really? He's like, no, they go out and get their lunch and they come back and then he sits with them, and I was like, okay, so it's important. But, so they take a phone into the jury room. And then that's how they participate, all four of them. And you can hear them speaking and so forth. And I call them. It's my way to accommodate. You had a question?
Well, I was just going to say, because we do, I'm in Vermont, and we do some online discussions with a similar platform, and so because we like the video, we have the preference for seeing them, we have to do it at night, because it's the same problem. It's a lot of, especially federal government offices, students can't access these video type webinars in those settings. So we do some of them live, we do them at like 7, 8 at night. It is much more of a challenge, and we tell them we have a strong preference for video. The other thing I'd say, I mean, you guys aren't graded, but in terms of the participation piece people were asking about before, ours is graded. And so I usually remind them before we have a discussion conference, I'd suggest you look at the rubric that affects the grading for this, for the discussion conferences, and one of them is active participation in it, and that usually gets everybody to talk at least once.
Right. Well, I tell them, I'm going to call on you. If you don't chime in, I will call on you. And not when you are particularly, like, when you volunteer, you've self-selected to respond to X, right? When you get called on, it could be anything. And they're like, no. Now, that's a really interesting, an evening night is great. At our school, because our externships can only be 10 units, and because most of them are part-time, our students have to go to class at night. So, and they only have, like, I won't make them come and sit and eat their dinner in my classroom, because they only have like an hour, really between 5 and 6. So, this so far has worked the best for us, but I will also tell them my preference is to see you. Plus, then you get to see me, and I always look fabulous. Wait, hold on 1 second, back it, and then on, Diane.
I'm just going to say, if you use Zoom, they actually have a really nice video phone app now.
Oh, do that.
So you can actually use it, I just used it for a meeting, and it's wonderful. I sat in my car, and we could screen share. It was small, but it worked.
Do you know, and this is for us to gather information too, does Zoom have a number of like how many people can participate?
Up to 25, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Cheaper version.
So we're one of these schools, unfortunately. I have 30 in my class.
There's a subscription version.
What's that?
You pay for the version that can have more people in.
Right, yeah. I can't, let's put it this way, if I can't get my class in at 30, the likelihood they would pay for the version.
You could give them a choice.
Right.
You pay, the students don't pay.
No, I know, I understand. I'm talking about the institution. WebEx, the thing about WebEx, it lets you have 1,000. Which if they could pack 1,000 into my class, surely would.
In some versions of Zoom, you can actually have more than 25, but you're limited to 25 on the screen at a time, but you can switch screens.
Right, Diane, you had what you wanted.
So I logged in, and what I see on mine is like, I can see who's on it, and then there's a little icon for like raising my hand.
Right.
So what shows up for you if I click on raising my hand?
Well, do it, because we'll see it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right, yeah, right.
So then you
And then I click on
you
Diane.
click on me, and then
I
I
don't know where you
talk.
went, but yeah. Then you can.
And if instead I show video, so basically, if the students can access video, then, and they click on that, and then you can see like their
Right.
own face there and, okay.
Right. Was there another question before I go on? Okay, so here's another hypo that relates to one of the ethical obligations we talk about. The student says, I had a job interview with a lawyer last week and was offered a job at her firm for the summer. I'm still negotiating the offer, but today the lawyer that made the offer appeared in my court and argued the merits of a motion that I worked on for the court. So this was a real thing that came up, and the student says, how should I handle this? Right, so I would throw it out to the students. Does anybody know the rule? Who said that?
I said
Tell the judge, yes. Okay, how should I handle this? Right? The answer is you have to tell the judge, and then the question comes out, if I take the job, can I work on the case? When it's still going on, next summer when I'm there. No. That's an easy one, but I got to an ask. So Carolyn was right. So a lawyer serving as a law clerk to a judge may negotiate for employment with the party or lawyer involved in the matter in which the clerk is participating personally and substantially, but only after the lawyer has notified the judge or other adjudicative officer. So when we go through the hypothetical, they give an answer, then I reaffirm they're correct. We work until we get the correct one. Not all of my students are as sharp as Carolyn, and we get the right answer, and then I say, and this, I'm not making this up. Here's where it comes from, Model Rule 1.2, and then for the second piece, a lawyer shall not represent, this responds to the second one, anyone in connection with the matter in which the lawyer participated personally and substantially as a law clerk to such person when they work for a judge, unless all the parties in the proceeding have given informed consent confirmed in writing. So I would probably tell the students, you should not work on that case. How likely is it everyone's going to consent? That's just ridiculous. Of course not. And then it poses other problems for the law firm.
But you know, one of the things I love about this typo is, so I teach ethics too, and I will tell you, I only have so much time to cover all the ethical rules. So I probably am not going to have talked about this in ethics, in my general ethics class. So the thing that I love is that during Externships, we do get to actually focus in and look specifically at the things that matter for what they're doing.
And these are their hypos, right?
Yeah.
These aren't my hypos that I came up with. These are problems that I saw in their reflective writing, either that semester or a semester before. And there are things that come up. These are real problems. They want to apply for jobs, and they're concerned that the externship might affect that. Another hypo. The legal aid lawyer that is supervising me wants to conduct a client interview by myself. Can I do this?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, right? You think so? Can I do this? What if the client asks me questions like, does she have a claim? What if she asks me for legal advice? Because you know how quickly it segues from, I just told you my story, am I going to win? And how badly do law students want to say, hell yeah, of course you're going to win. Because they're law students, and everyone's going to win that they represent. That's part of being a law student. So then I remind them, right? It's a crime. This is California. To practice law without a license, law students are legally forbidden to give legal advice or assist any person or client with legal papers at any time or under any circumstances, even if your advice is well intended, and of course it is, unless under the direct supervision of a licensed lawyer who approves the advice or assistance. So then it goes on to talk about the Business and Profession Code in California that covers this as well. So the answer would be for them, yes, you can do that client interview, and when they ask you if you're going to win, you should defer to the person that's supervising you so that they can answer that question. That's the point at which you tell the law student, remind them that you're a law student, that you're not a practicing lawyer. So that's another one. And then the last hypo, the judge I'm working with has pornography on his computer. This one is relevant to California. He didn't show it to me directly, right? This actually didn't come from a law student. Although, and I know another session is going to be talking about this later, right? So everyone's aware, federal judge, Ninth Circuit Judge Kaczynski, who had to step down. I had a student, a female student, who was with him in the last fall, who I talked to as this came down. I was like, actually I was more interested in the salacious details. I was concerned. I was going to tell me that, you know what happened? She's like, I never saw a thing. I was like, oh. Okay, good. Thank God! But I had a law student, a male, who's going to extern for Judge Kaczynski this semester, who called me at home during winter break and said, what do I do? And I said, well, we're going to have to find you another placement. But this is us, there are things that happen, maybe not as dramatic as this, and here's the hypo that's somewhat related to that. The judge I'm working with has pornography on his courthouse computer. He didn't show it to me directly, but I saw it when I was in his office getting something from his desk. So he's not like, look at the porno, but you walk back and you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, right? So then the student says, did the judge do something wrong? Is there something wrong with this? And you're the law students, what do you say? Other than, what were they pictures of? Because somebody's going to ask that. And I'll see a little thing saying, here's my hand.
Kitty porn or not?
Right. I would have asked that.
Right. Yeah.
I would have said, well, let me don't give me the detail, but did it appear to be minors? And let's assume the student says no. Right, because then that's a different kettle of fish, right? That's me saying, okay, my afternoon is gonna be a little bit different. Because you just told me a federal judge has kitty porn on their computer, I have a different afternoon plan. Then no, it's just a dump.
1-800-FBI.
Right, exactly, right? So did the judge do something wrong? So what would your other law students, what do you think? Did the judge do something, I mean, in terms of ethically wrong, either against the code of judicial conduct or against the ethical rules? Because remember, judges used to be lawyers. What are the law students, what do you all say? Is there an ethical rule that covers this kind of conduct? That's all right question.
It might be use of federal property.
Right, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because we're assuming it's his courthouse computer belongs to the federal courts, and so everyone is quiet.
You're assuming he's not reviewing evidence in the case.
Yes, right. See, so there's going to be more questions. Is this, is this related to a case? And let's assume that the student says, no, I don't think it is. No, not at all. So then we might pull this one up. Model Rule 8.4. This is pretty new. Right? It is professional misconduct for a lawyer to engage in conduct the lawyer knows or reasonably should know is harassment or discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, or socioeconomic status in the conduct related to the practice of law. So then the students are going to say, how did the pornography be related? How could it violate that?
Because he left it on his computer where she could see it?
And she didn't like it, and she felt it was offensive. But there's a lot of murkiness here, and there's a lot of subtlety, and these discussions are extremely lively. I mean, before you know it, the hour is up, and nobody's hung up because they're like, I want to hear what so-and-so has to say, especially on these types of issues. So, but this is certainly something that comes into the practitioner's mind, this new rule regarding harassment and discrimination and the fact that it's professional misconduct. So we would look at that, and then, so the last question is, let me move sometimes we have to move our picture down. And I told the career clerk about it, the pornography on the judge's computer, but he just laughed about it. The clerk's a lawyer, shouldn't he have done something? So again, then we go back and look at 8.4. It is, that person's a lawyer, what should I do? 8.3 says a lawyer who knows that a judge has committed a violation of the applicable rules, right, of judicial conduct that raises a substantial question as to the judge's fitness for office shall inform the appropriate authority. So then that raises issues, which then we talk about, of what's going on with the clerk. And as I am a licensed lawyer in the state of California. Now what am I going to do about it as the externship lawyer director? And then I think, why is law school paying my bar fees? Because now I have an obligation, which of course in that instance I would willingly fulfill, but that's an issue that we talk about. We also end up talking about what is fitness for office mean, which we spend a lot of time talking about in our ethics course. And so because there are questions, and what does the word substantial question mean? Does one, does looking at a screen of pornography that we don't think is related to a case, does that raise a substantial question? So it creates a lot of interesting discussion in the class, and then I take roll at the end, and then I send them on their way to go and snoop in the judge's chambers for them. We shouldn't be there. But that's what the course looks like on WebEx, and I understand Zoom. Do others have other platforms that they use if they've done it online?
Blue Jeans, but I like Zoom better.
What's that?
It's called Blue Jeans,
Blue
but
Jeans?
I prefer our meetings on Zoom.
On Zoom. Yes.
Blackboard Collaborate.
Okay. Right. And do other people, like I know, as I had mentioned earlier, we have some level of it's not as engaging as an in-person class, but we've come to it so far by necessity. Do other people share that experience of it having a bit not as effective as in-person? Anybody who's using it? Yes.
Well, I combine my in-person, so students who are in the vicinity of the law school come in person, and then people who are remotely placed participate in the same class online. and it's a challenge to make sure that they're engaged. And I love to do small group work, but when I have people online, I can't do that, and so I changed my whole teaching based on that. And so I'm
Right.
actually thinking about having a separate class for those who are remote.
Right, so you give them a choice. You can either participate remotely or you could come to.
No, I don't give them a choice, right? Because I gave them a choice, they all do remote. So the rule is if their externship is within an hour of law school, they have to participate in person.
See, what location are you? Where are you?
I'm in Salem, Oregon.
I was gonna say, so an hour is a real hour. In Los
Right.
Angeles, an hour
Although I
is
have a
10
lot,
minutes on the
I
freeway.
live in Portland, which is about an hour away, and I have a lot of students who extern in Portland, they live in Portland, and I kind of am mushy about those folks, but,
Yeah. Other things that people use that are effective or not?
Well, so I did the first time last summer online, and I used Blackboard Collaborate, and I did not like it very much. I don't know if you.
Did you have good training?
What?
Because that makes a big difference.
I had like a half-an-hour training from people in College Station remotely on people on how to use the whole system. But so I had a lot of learning, a learning curve steep, and I hope. So anyway, I'm probably going to be doing again, not that platform. We use WebEx at our school, but anyway, I learned the hard way doing this is that one, be clear with your students about their technology on their end, because with my students, first of all, Blackboard only allows four pictures at a time.
Right.
So I was like, video. They couldn't do the video bandwidth wherever they were. They couldn't do the audio and video at the same time. So everyone just went to audio. And so now I'm teaching to like a black screen or unless I have a
Yeah, I'm about 50-50. And I've got 30 students. I can see, I forget how many squares I can see. I'm about 50, I can see 50% and 50% I can't see.
And then they would do the chat function, and I found that distracting because I'd be talking a topic, and then like chats would come in later, or they start talking on something, other thread over here, the students among themselves. So I found that kind of distracting, the whole chat function. And then breakouts. I like breakout sessions. Blackboard allows breakout sessions, but then there's my poor training. I was like, I disconnected them accidentally. I thought, I was teaching the breakout. You can do these switching, and then I was like, sorry, and then it was kind of not. But anyway, so anyway, the point is it's really good to think about your platform.
Right, and to practice with it.
Yes.
Yeah, because our cohort is large during the school year and small during the summer, because at our law school, we have actually many summer externs, but they're not doing it for units. So the ones that are doing it for units participate in class. And so I had a summer to practice with them, which it was much more forgiving to only have like 6. Because we would get disconnected, or it would just be a little haywire, and we'd start again, versus having 30, where you just have to sort of be flexible and yet keep it moving. Does anybody have other questions about the classroom simulation? Yes? Over here? Was there another
I
question?
was just going to ask if there's a platform that you can use that, so it sounds like the Blackboard Connect, I don't think we use Blackboard at my school, but like, is there one where you can break out, like have small group discussions? Will Zoom let you do that?
Yes.
Zoom does a great job. WebEx training is a different platform than WebEx meeting, and that allows you to break.
That's right. We don't use that one, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. Other questions about the simulated class component? Yes.
So when you do the online class, is there an option to also record it at the same time?
Yes.
So then, if people miss class, do they have to make it up? Because so at Laverne, we tape roll if they miss a certain number of classes. I mean, the regular doctrinal courses, right? If they miss a certain number of classes, then they're not allowed to take a final exam. So with this, if I require, I require attendance at the classes, and I haven't been doing online classes. So if they don't make it to the class, then I have to do these makeups with them. And with this, with online, I figure maybe fewer will be absent, and then it's easier to have the makeup.
Right. So Sandy's done a few makeups. I first don't tell the students that there's any, you have to attend all the classes. That's expectation. I don't say that you can miss 3 or anything that sometimes you do in doctrinal classes. I just tell them you have to be online. I figure it's Fridays, it's at noon, there are very few excuses that one could legitimately have that could preclude you from participating. Even if you're ill, right? You can be at home and turn it on and lay on the couch and participate. And I've had students who are ill who've done that. I haven't had a big problem with that. I know, Sandy, you've done some makeups.
So I have, and I haven't recorded, so I mentioned here what people think. So where I have it recording is it already feels like an unsafe space in a sense because you're online and there's not my smiling face saying, it's okay, baby. And so then I thought, if they thought they were being recorded, that really hampered their sort of willingness to be forthcoming. So I haven't ever done a recording of it. So what I've done for makeups is just do individual sort of meetings. I don't know, so what do people, do people record their online classes? Anybody?
I don't think
Yeah,
For the same reason.
Yeah.
For the same reason. So if I ever record even in my building, in my live classes, it's only if I'm delivering information for makeup. I don't record when it's more interactive. But I think there might be a way to do the asynchronous piece, right? So there might be a way to have the makeup, if they're so remote that they can't come in and meet with me. I haven't done it asynchronous, and I know lots of people in this room and elsewhere have done it. But, so I've only used video and online for synchronous, but that's a new frontier I'm still playing with, but.
Yeah, I know that the faculty member that teaches the private placement, she's had a few minutes. And she also, like myself, doesn't, never raises the subject until someone says, I can't attend because so-and-so. Then she will say to them, if you miss, you have to come in and meet with me, and you have to do all these other additional assignments. And sometimes then the person suddenly can attend. It's amazing how that works.
No, I've done that, even with live class, I now say, if you miss, then, and we're discussing a chapter, you have to do an additional paper on the chapter. And
changes the calculus.
Yeah.
Other things people do?
I
Questions?
have recorded, and they are self-conscious. I tell them at the beginning of the first meeting, online meeting, I am going to record these. They're self-conscious for about 20 minutes, and after that, and with the second meeting, they forget all about the fact that it's being recorded.
Great.
Okay, so
I think we better.
yeah, we're going to segue to.
Okay?
Yes. So Diane, are we moving to Diane's?
Yes.
Okay. So Diane teaches at Laverne in a small program, and so we were going to allow her to tell us about how that works with her classroom component.
So just first of all, so at the University of Laverne, we have about approximately 250 students total. Are any of you from small schools? All right, thank you. So in my externship class, I have, sometimes my classes are really small. It feels like a tiny little seminar. I'll have, 5 students, 7 students. And the reason for that is that I have a class component, but my class component is only required for the first-time externs. So for the second-time externs, I require, for all of the students are required to do journal entries, turn in signed timesheets, and then I have additional reflection exercises. So the reason I don't have veteran externs, somebody else used that term before. The reason I don't have them do the class is because I haven't really changed the course. And I have not come up with multiple different time slots to have a class for first-time externs and then a different class for second-time externs. But I've heard ideas now at this conference for how to handle that if I decide to add a class. So some of the challenges that I've faced at a very small school is that, while I hear about other externship courses having basically separating them by practice area, so oftentimes it seems like the people who are practicing, who are in DA's offices and public defender's offices are together, and the people in private practice are together, that you know what I mean. If I did that, then really, each of my small groups would get even smaller, and I'd be having these meetings with 2 people or 3 people and 5 people, and so I don't do that. So what I do instead is I have the one class, and I have thought about what I've seen in the other classes that I teach. I'm the director of the Justice and Immigration Clinic at the University of Laverne, and I teach the immigration law class, and I'm, a tenured faculty member, so I'm in all the faculty meetings, I hear the concerns that people have and the experiences that professors have with their students. So I try to I try to choose topics that I think are relevant to the development necessary for all of our students. But just like in any other school, we have sort of a wide range of capacity or capabilities. So and then on the other, the other duties that we have in the externship program, we basically work with career services. So the actual director of externships is our director of career services. On all the administrative type work, they handle that. We use Qualtrics for the agreements. We use Qualtrics for the evaluations. I have students use Qualtrics for the self-evaluation forms, for goals, exercises, and all of those things, because it all gets collected and it all goes into a spreadsheet already, which makes it much easier for both the Career Services Office to review and for me to review. And then I have the benefit of being in Southern California and finally being a member of GLACE, the Greater Los Angeles Consortium on Externships. It is a long name. And with them, we're able to work on the training and support, and we have a manual to work with the other supervising attorneys. The subjects that we cover in the class itself, I try to think about the micro type things, the skills that the specific the students need to perform well in their externships. And then I also try to think about some of the larger, the macro issues that I think are really important in the law, that are important in our justice system. So we focus on professionalism, and I tell them, look, I mean, when I say I've boiled this down, I mean I have really boiled down professionalism. So while there are many different ways to talk about it and lots of different resources, I have told them that there is essentially one rule that I have for professionalism, and it is that they must be conversant about whatever it is they're working on, whatever decisions they make. And when they say, when I say conversant about it, I mean you need to be able to justify anything that you have done by rules, right? By rules, and be able to have a conversation about it with your supervising attorney or with me. So it could be, down to the basics of grammar and punctuation. Why did you decide to write this way? Why did you put a comma? Or why did you? And that shows me whether or not they know the rules of grammar and punctuation. If we're talking about a legal rule, legal research that they've done, then they need to be able to talk to me about what their research trail was, where they started, how they came to the conclusions that they came to, so that I know whether they have been as detail-oriented as they need to be, and that these are the kinds of discussions that they need to be able to have with other attorneys, with the people who are supervising them. Because a lot of times I find that the students are much less detail-oriented in their classwork. And, they're trying to get by, they're trying to make sure that they finish the basics for all of their classes. And that they have not necessarily learned how detail-oriented law practice really is. So I'm using this to show them that this applies to everything, right? It applies to formatting documents, it applies to the legal theory of the case, it applies to legal research, it applies to criminal punctuation, like I said, everything. I talk to them and assign readings on basically planning their learning. I think all of our students feel like, well, I'm in a placement, I'm going to be working, and of course I'm going to learn no matter what. And I agree that they will. But I say there are differences in the quantity and the quality of the learning that you will do in any placement if you prepare for it, right? You prepare and you think about what you want to learn and you plan out your learning. So I assign readings from Learning from Practice. and there's an assignment in learning from practice or an exercise where they plan an observation, right? So they get an observation assignment, or they know that they're going to have opportunities to observe, and I say, all right, what is it you want to observe? Who are the attorneys that you would like to observe, and doing what particular thing? And then what are the things that you want to, you know, why is it you want to see that? What do you want to learn from that? And when do you plan on doing this observation? I look over what they have, what they've written, and may be able to discuss and suggest other things to add some depth to it. And then later in the semester, they are to turn that in again after they've actually conducted the observation. And then we go over ethics in a similar way. And then the macro courses, so these, or the classes, the implicit bias, I have had failures and I've had successes in trying to talk about implicit bias with the students. I think it's really hard. And the times that I would say I've tanked doing that are the times when I've assigned videos to watch, I've assigned readings, and then I just try to go in and get people to just have those hard discussions. And I sit and I have just the room full of silence. And so I thought, well, that really did not work well. So then I asked some more questions. I kind of forced conversation, which then actually it was worse. And so the next time I had that class, I invited a guest speaker who is actually an expert on, not just on implicit bias, but an expert on diversity and inclusivity, who has worked in multiple different settings. And I had her run the class. And it was like my observation, my professional observation. What do I want to learn from this? Who am I going to invite to speak? What is she going to do? And what I learned from that was that one of the things that you can do is you can actually ask questions. You can do it's kind of like a quick write, but what she did, this was Professor Murray Gray, she asked the student, she said, I want you to think of 5 things within 30 seconds and just write them down. What are the 5 characteristics that you think are most important in the person that you would date? Date or marry or whatever, because we have married students and we have single students. And then we put this all on a list on the board, and we got all kinds of things. So you compile a list that actually includes things like race, it includes religion, but it includes things like kindness and sense of humor. It includes all kinds of things, height, easy to laugh or quick to laugh. And in the dating context, in the social context, people are absolutely willing to talk about why these characteristics are important, what they mean to different people. And because everybody starts talking about it in that personal way, then for me, so I think in the class with the person I deemed to be the expert, that was the whole conversation. In the times that I've taught that one class after, my experience has been that I don't make that conversation go on for the whole class period. We have that conversation for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then segue into why it's so easy to talk about it in the personal context, but why it's so much more difficult to talk about it in the work context, right? Why is it okay to have these kinds of preferences personally? Why is it not okay to have these, have those things as important in selection processes, in bullying cases, and all of that in the professional context. So that's the way I sort of worked with that. And there are lots of really good videos, TED Talks, and there's an ABA video on implicit bias that I think is really good. And then I have a class on some systemic issues in the justice system. And I'm not going to talk very long about that, because that kind of goes into this other thing that we've dealt with at Laverne. So since the ABA approved, or now allows paid externships, the University of Laverne had to decide whether or not we were going to allow paid externships. So just out of curiosity, how many of your schools have approved paid externships? Okay, so we ended up approving paid externships, and that has increased the number of students who participate in the externship program. At the time that, before the ABA had voted on this last time and approved it, I was kind of against paid externships. It was like it was for all the same reasons that had been argued. But now that we have them, I wanted to think about the good things from it. So the good things that have happened is that we've been able to develop relationships with more small firms. When I say we, I really mean as a faculty member. I really mean and career services always have those relationships with the small firms, but they had little ability to, I think, to impact their training, right? The way they train law students or the way they work with law students. So through the externship program, I think we can introduce the teaching and training to the supervising attorneys, right? How can you give better feedback to law students? What are some other things you might need to talk to you about the work that they're doing? How can you give feedback to students? How do you communicate with them? When I say it changes and improves the work that's assigned to law students, I mean, we have students who are working as paralegals, the population of students at Laverne is, it's really varied. We have students who are sort of traditional and have gone straight from undergrad into law school, but we also have a lot of students who are married. So we have students who are not married but who have kids. We have students who are married with kids. We have a lot of students who are very financially strapped, like who are really struggling and they need to work. And so this allows them to get credit for some of the work that they're doing, and like I said, it can change the nature of some of the work that they're doing, because when we talk to the employers to determine whether or not we can approve the placement as an externship, we basically say, look, this has to be a learning experience, and in order for it to be a learning experience, it means that we can't approve this just to have the student do the same work that he or she has been doing all along, right? If the person's been working as a paralegal, we're not going to give them credit just for working as a paralegal. Are you willing to step up and increase and change the work that that you assign to this person, right? So they've always seen the person, who's working full-time, has been working full-time at the firm for, however many years. They see this person as the paralegal they hired and continue to see them as a paralegal instead of the law student, the law clerk, the soon-to-be attorney. And I think this helps the student, and it helps the law firm to see the person differently. And like I said, to change their duties, to increase their duties, and give them, help them to develop professionally. One of the challenges that I feel working with the students who are in the private firms is that, a lot of the work they're doing does not really, it's not bad, it's just that it doesn't kind of jive with all the normal discussion that I have that has to do with social justice mission. And so that's one of the challenges that I have faced. And then there are, so I have seen myself primarily as a clinician in my teaching life. A few years ago, I ended up becoming responsible for externships as well, at least in some capacity, and now, like I said, I still teach the class. So I'm new to this conference. I've gone to some of the externship presentations at the AALS Clinical Conference, but this is my first time at the Lexington Conference. And so I hear a lot of good ideas about things to do about classes to have or ways to enhance. And so these are some of the things that I'm thinking of changing. Possibly requiring the class component for the veteran externs, enhancing the, so I know that our class component is a little bit shorter in hours than many of the ones that responded to the survey. Not by a lot, but it makes me think, okay, well, so I think that our students require as much training as any other law student, so I think, where have I cut things short, where do I need to beef up a little bit? So I think that maybe our orientation could be and should be a little bit longer, and then add, one or two other additional classes. One of the classes that I was thinking of adding is the third prompt on that slide. Since we don't have the specialized classes for people in criminal law, specialized classes for people in government positions, specialized classes for people in public interest organizations, and then another one for private firms, I was thinking I could at least have one class session where they're really meeting in those groups with a guest lecturer for each of those. And then, because we're a small school without a huge budget, you can ask for guest lecturers without paying them additional money, right? So I was thinking of that, and then also because of all this, for years I've been thinking of adding online modules, and I haven't done it just because it requires additional time that I feel like I haven't had. But I think it might solve some of my other problems with attendance, and then I still have to think about whether or not to record or not. So that's basically what we do.
Thank you. So we have 3 minutes left.
Sorry.
No, that's not your fault. We planned to go. But we had some questions in the middle, but I do have one question for everybody. So one of the things I really thought about when I was thinking about this is, not just the ADA changes, but the change in the world. And I wondered whether people have had a lot more discussion in their classes about sexual harassment and the sort of Me Too movement and those sorts of things. So how many people have actually seen an uptick on that in their classes? Okay, well, there's 2 of us.
Just in talking about it, or in students actually saying they experience?
Yeah, because we all do something about professionalism or bias or something where it could come up. And I just wondered whether it was sort of coming up, because I didn't necessarily raise it as a piece. It was just sort of part of bias. And it came up a lot more than it ever has in the past. And so I just wondered whether that had permeated through the law schools yet. But obviously the answer is no. Yeah.
Well, when you were talking about the change in the world, and responding to one thing Diane was just saying, is because I do have mixed externship class, I'm a small school, smallish, and because I do have private sector, I don't have paid, but I have people in law firms and corporate, then it was already going this way, but the political change has really pushed me to use the public citizen lawyer topic to say, I don't care that you may not be doing pro bono or public interest work at your placement. We are all lawyers, we all have the same duty, we all have the same obligation to ensure justice, the rule of law, democracy. This is not a political discussion, this is about responsibility of lawyers. And that has been a way to bring the topics and create some common sphere where we're not, and so I will never go back, even when we get bigger, to breaking back into small groups. I will never do that. I think the mixed class where they're learning from each other, really understanding the pressures public defenders and legal aid people face, as well as the corporate, that is a richness. And it is, for me, it's only become heightened in the new world.
How many do you have in your class?
It depends on enrollment. I have them all, anywhere from 15 to 30, depending on enrollment of first-timers.
Okay. And it's a live class?
It's a live class unless I have someone in a remote placement, and then they are synchronous. So far, been able to make the timing work.
Yeah, because I really struggle. I mean, I love the idea of doing a mix. My class is kind of mixed. It's government and public interest, and one of the classes we have is government lawyer, actually a public interest lawyer, question mark.
Great.
And they really fills an article about why would anyone want to be a public interest lawyer. But I love the idea of the mix because I think you're right that you can get that in.
And I do have one class for each of my smaller groups, because we do sometimes with guest lecturers, sometimes not, but there are some specific issues. So it's only 1 credit, so I meet every week, they don't, because people are coming and going, but for the most time, they're together. And so that's how I've sort of threaded the needle on a lot of your issues, a lot of the same issues.
Thank you all so much. The way we can keep the conversation going is by posting stuff on Extern. I know you're trying to be hearing people say that, but Kendall says not many people have sent her stuff, so really, before you do anything else, at least send yourself an email to do that before you do. Thank you very much.